Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being with us. My name is Anne Finucane, and I have the pleasure of speaking with each of these governors and premiers that are here with us today. So thank you all for being here today. We appreciate it. And this is like a lightning round. I'm going to be asking questions, and each of these very important individuals will be answering them hopefully in 2 or 3 minutes so that we can get through this and the press can ask questions of their own. But listen, this has been going on this morning in closed door sessions, and in light of what we understand are ongoing conversations and negotiations around tariffs and more, we're going to use this time to ask our questions on the perspective of our important individuals and elected officials, whether it is lost revenue or rising prices on both sides of the border. Many of you have made statements about the detrimental effects of rising tariffs, and perhaps the G7 will create some new clarity, but until then, we will still have the situation of rising tariffs being a difficult situation, particularly for those of us in the Northeast where Canada is our #1 trading partner. And in the case of New York, it's one of the top 2 or 3 trading partners with Canada writ large. So with that in mind, and given that we have so little time, I will begin with you, Governor Healey, if I may. One of the strengths of our Commonwealth's economy is the healthcare industry, and including whether we're talking about medical research, our academic institutions, our universities, our medical instruments and pharmaceuticals, certainly biotech. These are all incredibly important to this region, and it's also a piece of our export. Further to that, and maybe to complicate it more, those that are so committed to the STEM fields, and presumably many are from Canada, who will not be able to come into our country to go to our universities, to attend them, to graduate, and become the future scientists of tomorrow. So with those twin headwinds, I wonder what you might think about that and how you're addressing it.
Well, I think you're right to talk about it as a double whammy, and I'd add a third leg to that stool. What is happening right now with the imposition of tariffs on Canadian products, it's actually disrupting our supply chain here. Tomorrow, or today actually, we open the International Bio Convention. People are coming from all around the world to Massachusetts because we're recognized as a global hub for life sciences. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because of years of investment, partnership, including international partnerships and trade partnerships that span the globe, and certainly cross between the United States and Canada. Because of tariffs, we're seeing disruptions in supply chains to things that actually make that industry go here in Massachusetts. Testing devices, testing equipment, sensors, stents, all sorts of technologies that are used in this space have been directly impacted because of tariffs specific to Canada. So that is a problem. The other problem is the personnel part of this. We have nearly 2,400 folks who come from Canada to study in Massachusetts every single year. Think about the postdocs, the junior faculty in our research institutions, from the Broad to Dana-Farber to Boston Children's Hospital, across our teaching hospitals and academic medical centers, as well as our medical schools. I think about the biotech companies here. We have 18 of the 20 top biotech companies in the world in Massachusetts, and there is such an important relationship between our international folks who come here to study here, to research here, by the way, to incubate here, to win Nobel Prizes here, to start companies here. And the fact is, nearly half of the companies in America are started by folks who are foreign-born. And so this relationship between our Canadian allies and friends is definitely impacted, and we want to do all that we can in sending this message that in the Northeast and New York, we are committed to maintaining those important ties that exist, particularly when it comes to health and life sciences, because you asked specifically about that, but it is much, much broader.
It is indeed. Well, thank you, Governor. Governor Hochul, if you would, obviously New York is very important to Canada. Canada is very important to New York. What actions can we take to increase the transmission ties between our region and enable greater opportunities for cross-border trading in a variety of energy sources, given energy is so important to both sides of the border?
Thank you for the question. First of all, thank you to Governor Maura Healey for inviting us here to the beautiful Massachusetts State House and convening the Northeastern governors as well as the Eastern Canadian premiers and representatives. It's an important conversation, and perhaps it should have started at the outset because we're reminding ourselves of the shared interest, the common bond that exists between all of us. It's not just the tourism or the industries that the governor just spoke of. It's just our neighbors. I mean, these are relationships that have now been damaged because of rhetoric out of Washington, as well as tariffs, which, how do you spell tariff? It is nothing more than a TAX tax. And Americans need to know that this is a tax on everything they buy, and it hurts our competitiveness, and we stand to lose hundreds of thousands of jobs if these truly go into effect as envisioned. So I always want to call out what this is all about, as well as condemning the insults to our Canadian friends. We want them to come back to our country, but we understand the anger that they feel. But I'm worried about families in New York State and the additional costs that they're going to spend on everything, including energy. Energy is now becoming a huge cost driver for our homes, and we have great relationships. We're talking, we have, next year we'll power over 1 million homes with hydroelectric power from Quebec. That starts because you have a friendship, a relationship of trust, and I'm very excited about announcing that. I launched it in my very first days as governor. The electric grid is so important because we're bringing Micron, we're bringing semiconductor manufacturers, we're bringing artificial intelligence companies that are going to be huge consumers of power, and I want to make sure that we continue being as competitive as we can, but we have to use that. And Canada has been a friend of ours in providing this. So I don't want any more rhetoric, tariffs, or anything that's going to set our relationship further back than it already has been. Now it's time to start healing and having our own individual relationships between New York, our own states, and the various provinces to secure our energy future, regardless of what happens in Washington. We have to operate as independent actors in this space and think of ourselves, because clearly Washington is not. And I apologize, I have to get back to the great state of New York because it's always complicated. Something's always something. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being with us, Governor.
Thank you, Kathy. Good to see you.
Okay, Premier Ford, if I may. Ontario is the largest province trading partner with the USA. You're incredibly important to us, and I hope we're incredibly important to you. You recently unveiled your vision for a Fortress AMCAN, a renewed strategic alliance between the U.S. and Canada. Can you tell us a bit about that and what your goals are for it?
Well, first of all, thank you, Anne. I want to thank Governor Healey for convening this meeting and bringing our great colleagues from around Eastern Canada and Eastern United States to come together and really get the message out, get the message to the American people, the Canadian people. We're the closest friends and allies and always will be. And it goes back to my message regarding the AMCAN Fortress, the American-Canadian Fortress. You put a ring around Canada and the U.S., we'll be the strongest, the wealthiest, the most prosperous regions anywhere in the world. I always say Canada isn't the problem, neither is the U.S. China is the single problem. They've cut off the U.S. for any critical minerals that they want to use for either technology, aerospace, or military use. Ontario has more critical minerals than anywhere in the entire world. And who do I want to send them to? I want to send them to our closest friends and allies. I've said over and over again, I love Americans, I love the U.S., but Canadians love Americans. And I know Americans love Canadians. And the rhetoric that we've been hearing out of the president is unfortunate. We want to continue to grow our relationship, give certainty to the world that the U.S. and Canada is open for business. They're really, leaders around the world that I've talked to are dumbfounded. They've stopped, took a few steps back and said, I can't believe the president's going after your country. And we're in disbelief too. But now we're going to move forward. Energy is absolutely critical. You heard Governor Hochul. You see the data hubs that are going up, and they suck more energy than anything on Earth. And where are you going to get your energy? Hopefully from Quebec, from New Brunswick, from Ontario. We keep the lights on and businesses going to 1.5 million homes and businesses. We're leaders in the small modular reactors around the world in the G7. We're leaders in nuclear energy, which is clean, green, reliable, cost-effective energy. And I invite every single governor, every single senator, congressperson, come up to Ontario. It's an hour away. In some cases, it's probably half an hour, and see our technology at the Ontario Power Generation. The ironic thing is, Governor, as I was mentioning, it's American companies that are helping us. General Electric, Tennessee Valley Authority, and the Ontario Power Generation, working collaboratively together to take on the world. That's what we need to do. We have to start focusing on working together. And I always say, united we stand, divided we fall. And again, thank you to Governor Healey and my colleagues for having me by today. Thank you.
Thanks so much. You know, it is true, we, in this region of the country, we export billions of dollars of goods and intellectual property to Canada, but you import to us twice that. So, and we're also grateful for the tens of thousands of jobs that Canadian companies spend here in the Northeast. Governor Mills, if I may, New Brunswick and Quebec are Maine's single largest trading partners. Can you share with us your concerns for the Maine people if these tariffs were to take effect fully? And if anything, what can be done to prevent it, particularly since 80% of Maine's heating fuel comes from Canada?
Right. Maine is the largest, most heavily dependent on oil for heating fuel, residential heating fuel in particular. So we depend very much on oil refined in Canada. Half of that oil product, though, comes from the United States, either the Gulf or Western United States, comes through Canada and back down into the United States. So those products don't know if they're from Canada or from America. They're from all over, frankly. Yeah. And it would really cripple our heating systems. There are 150 gas stations in Maine owned by Irving Oil. And we've been talking to the president and the new CEO of Irving Oil as well. Irving Lumber is the largest landowner in the state of Maine. We have a lot of symbiotic relationships with those two entities. But tariffs in general are already affecting our very important craft brewing industry. 176 craft brewers that depend on aluminum and packaging materials that come from Canada. And so we depend very much on our relationship with Canada. And so our tourism industry as well depends a lot on Canada. Almost a million people a year come to Maine. We're only 1.4 million people total, but about almost a million people come from Canada alone to our Old Orchard beaches, our Kennebunk ports, our Algonquins and Bar Harbors and Acadia National Park. And we don't want them to miss out. And I understand the hostility that people in Canada must feel from that rhetoric. I feel that too. It hurts all of us. And we want to make sure that Canadian citizens understand we want them to come, we want to exchange, we want Maine people to go to Canada as well. I'm taking my own Goodwill road trip next week into New Brunswick and Nova Scotia at least, and hoping to make more friends there. We've always been intertwined. Our paper mill, Twin Rivers, imports pulp across the river through a pipeline from Edmundston. The families there grew up with each other, and my own ancestry goes way back into Pugwash, Nova Scotia. Hers goes into what, Newfoundland? Back to Newfoundland. We're deeply intertwined, but generation upon generation, culturally, cuisine, language. We have a 611-mile border. Maine is almost, it's hugged by Canada, by New Brunswick and Quebec, and we value that relationship more than anything.
Thank you. Minister Skeet, how can governments and private sector leaders collaborate to enhance, particularly around supply chain, as Governor Mills just sort of illustrated in your remarks, and innovation across key industries?
Well, first of all, Governor Healey, thank you so much for this great and opportune initiative that you've launched to get us all together. To the governors present, thank you for your friendship. Quebec couldn't ask for better neighbors. And we recognize all the hard work that you're doing to maintain that friendship in these difficult times. To answer the question, I have to say the collaboration is already underway, and our supply lines are so deeply intertwined already. Right now, a lot of the commerce that we do together is mutually beneficial. We send you parts, you send us finished products, and vice versa. And so how do we double down on that? How do we go further? Well, there are a lot of challenges in the world. One of those challenges is access to microchips, R&D, and shared things. And when I look at some of the interventions that you made with IP and patents, there's a lot of opportunities for us to do more there. But in terms of chip manufacturing, my reflection goes right away to chip manufacturing. When you look at what we're doing together in Bromont, in this corridor that we've created for chip manufacturing, for me, that's a perfect example not only of research, marrying technology, but also national security. When we think that right now our great mutual dependency on chips made in Asia, and how some of that, most of that, all of that has to come back if we're going to be able to manufacture our own critical components. This kind of collaboration for me is a great representation of just one sphere where we work together. And so I would say for me, that collaboration bodes well for the future, and I think we need to do more of that. And so the word to answer your question for me would be interdependency, and of course, shared fate. We share a common fate.
That's heavy. Thank you. And of course, it takes people to make that happen. So, Premier Holt, if I may, you've emphasized your interest and focus on human capital. And relative to what Minister Skeet just said, what joint initiatives can the U.S. and Canada do in terms of strengthening the workforce development and ensure this skilled labor force that we're going to need for the future?
Well, I think it's an interesting time in the war for talent right now, and I can really empathize with what the governor said about Massachusetts in particular being an R&D hub, and I'm not going to pretend that folks in Canada don't see this as an opportunity for us to attract some of the brightest and best from here who are now seeing funding cut and challenges put in place. But I really appreciate Governor Healey and Governor Mills and all of the governors here the opportunity to talk about how we can partner better. So maybe we'll borrow your talent for a little while, and then when we get back to normal, because that's what we all want. We all want to get back to the normal relationship of Canada and the U.S. being best friends, great neighbors, and working for the mutual benefit of our societies, whether that's economically or with research or and social initiatives. We've got some interesting things happening with clinical trials in New Brunswick. It's a great place to do a decentralized trial. So maybe we'll borrow some of the folks and then be able to give them back and build the kind of connected partnerships between our research organizations that will stand through the test of time. I think on the energy side, we have a lot of opportunity in New Brunswick, like in Ontario, where there's nuclear capacity, where we do supply a lot of energy products to the entire New England seaboard and to Maine, that we can build some shared talent in that energy infrastructure that needs to become even more resilient and even more strengthened. I think we can tie our grids together in ways that are going to benefit both of our countries, and we can build the kind of talent pools through joint training initiatives and through other partnerships that will see us through to the other side of this when we get back to normal.
But you have a lot to say about that.
That's a normal.
I talked to Premier Holt about this. I mean, that's reality. In the same way that Canadian institutions are recruiting right here in Massachusetts and across the country, our talent, China is everywhere. And China's the one who's winning in all of this. And so I think it is an opportunity for continued partnership and growing those things. I would like to not necessarily have anyone leave, right? Even though New Brunswick is a wonderful place to study and research. But if we can have more collaborations, that's what we want to do.
You want addition, not subtraction.
Addition, not subtraction, correct.
Governor Scott, if I may, you're hearing a lot about energy sources, the need for energy. Premier Holt spoke about the vast reservoir of minerals that Ontario has, and there is growing interest and research and promise of nuclear resources that work together to accelerate development, innovative technologies, and perhaps greater energy. Could you speak about that, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you very much. You hear me? Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question. First of all, as maybe the longest serving governor in the Northeast, hard to say, but maybe some perspective. New England governors have been meeting with Eastern premiers since 1973. And why is that? Because Canada is so important to us for many reasons. We don't just buy things, sell things, visit one another. We build things together. We have families that are intertwined in Canada and in the States. So it's really important to us. 50% of Vermont's energy comes from Canada. About 25% of that is from Hydro-Quebec. We have about natural gas in particular. 100% of our natural gas comes from Canada. And about 80% of our fuel oil comes from Canada. So that tells you how important Canada is to the States. But we need each other in order to survive in the future. Getting back to your nuclear question, I believe we need to wean ourselves off from carbon-emitting fuels. We need to electrify. But to do that with AI coming in and with everything else, and if we want to transition to this carbonless society, we need baseload power. We do pretty well in Vermont. Again, with Hydro-Quebec's help, with all the renewables we have in Vermont, and we get some from New York as well. A large percentage of what we use is renewable. But if we're going to go a step further with AI and electrification, we're going to need more baseload power. In order to do that, I think the quickest, easiest way is with nuclear. And I know that Premier Ford has talked about that with us and having much of what we need in order to transition. We shut down our nuclear plant years ago. I was one of 4 senators, by the way, at that time when that vote was taken. I voted against shutting Vermont Yankee down because I knew we needed that baseload power, and it was less expensive than all the other power sources that we have. So I think it's essential as we move forward to consider nuclear in the future.
Well, thank you. You know, the International Energy Agency portends that we will have to scale up so much on energy, not only for industrialized nations, but developing nations and emerging economies, and maybe double what we need in electricity. So these are issues that go well beyond the borders of the Northeast and Canada. But we are a place that we can make these happen, particularly at MIT, where a lot is happening in terms of nuclear. Premier Hogan, let's now look at that from Canada's perspective. How do you see cross-country border collaboration shaping the region's energy future?
Thank you very much, and thanks, Governor Healey, for this opportunity for everybody to get together. I didn't set Governor Scott up to provide that answer about energy needs and greening our grids, but it is a great opportunity for me to talk about how Newfoundland and Labrador fits into the energy conversation, not only in our province and the Atlantic region, but with the Northeastern states as well. People have mentioned that the neighbors of Quebec are sending transmission and power down through to that province through Hydro-Quebec, and Hydro-Quebec was mentioned as well. But important for everybody to realize a lot of the energy that's coming through Quebec does come from the Churchill River in Labrador, Newfoundland and Labrador. And of course, we have a historic partnership now where we're upgrading some facilities and building brand new facilities along with Hydro-Quebec and NL Hydro to essentially double the production on that river from about 5,000 to 9,500 megawatts. So we do have an opportunity to continue to develop green energy options in our province, and with partnership through Quebec and through our neighbors there, we can certainly work with our neighbors in this part of this country as well. And I think Newfoundland and Labrador, we're not ready to stop there. When we met with the Prime Minister and the First Ministers 2 weeks ago, I know Premier Houston spoke a lot about it on our behalf. Energy East Partnership is the way he phrased it. And if we can get together in the Atlantic region and develop energy opportunities, I don't think we should stop there. We can continue to go down into this part of the country as well. We all have different opportunities in terms of transmission and generation assets that we can contribute to such a partnership. And in our province, we certainly have hydroelectricity, we have natural gas offshore, and we have onshore wind as well. So tremendous opportunities for our part of the country, our part of the region in Canada to work in close collaboration with our neighbors here in the States.
Thank you, and I know we all are enthusiastic that Mark Carney is not only a great man in public policy, but his public policy around clean energy and the future of energy is cutting edge, and he was able to do the same in business as well. Governor McKee, if I could, let's sort of switch up a little bit and talk about the U.S. and Canada in terms of improving our airline routes, infrastructure improvements, and facilitate travel between the two regions.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I just want to, Governor Scott was mentioning how this group has met long before we were governors, even you, Phil. And that puts us in a very good position. Premier Ford, your idea of convening governors, not just from the Northeast, but nationally. We know governors from around the country that are going to get impacted by this rhetoric that is positioning you to provide us so much candor today in terms of exactly what's on your mind. So happy to, if that invitation goes out, I'd be happy to travel to convene, and let's bring more governors in, because governors matter, and just as premiers matter. And we're the ones who are working day to day on what impacts this is having on our states, our respective states. As far as the travel goes, we want to continue doing that. Rhode Island is fortunate to have one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing airport in the country. And now we're bringing hubs in from Breeze Air and others that we're having direct flights throughout the country. And we'd love to be able to open up that path both ways into Canada, because we know that if we bring really smart people into Rhode Island, that we are going to get certain results from that. And I think vice versa, if we bring our skill and talent into Canada on an economic basis, we're going to get the benefit of that. And then the cultural side of the issues, from Rhode Island, we have I think one of the largest French-Canadian communities in the entire country in the city of Woonsocket. I ran a business there for several years and got to know the French community, Canadian community, very directly. So opening up those paths, but this dialogue today has been very eye-opening for me. And what's been said from our colleagues here in Canada, we need to listen to. This rhetoric that is going on that creates division needs to stop. And I think that a meeting like this helps get that message going, but it needs to continue to happen. So, Governor Healey, thank you for convening us here today, and let's make that visit up to Canada. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Governor McKee. Premier Houston, if I may. First of all, Halifax and Boston have a very tight relationship. I'm sure many of you know this, but more than 100 years ago, there was an explosion in Halifax, terrible fires, and Boston came to Halifax's aid in the middle of a blinding storm. And each year, Halifax arrives at Christmas time with our Christmas tree that sits on the Boston Garden. So thank you very much, because it's a very special thing that has continued for many years. Nonetheless, there are parts of Canada that have taken actions to really reduce the American product on your shelves. We need you to keep putting our products on your shelves. So as states and provinces pursue major investments in new energy, which we've been talking about here, and grid infrastructure, how can we collaborate to reduce those costs to consumers, promote energy affordability, and try to work through some of these issues?
Well, thank you so much. And that's the relationship between Halifax and Nova Scotia and Boston and Massachusetts is so important to us. We do send that Christmas tree every year as a reminder that we don't forget the kindness that was shown to us in an incredible time of need. So that's a tradition that continues and will continue, because it's all about relationships and friendships. And thank you, Governor Healey, for pulling us together today and letting us look each other in the eye. Remember, we are friends. We have a long-standing relationship. And even today, I was very pleased to hear about Governor Mills's roots back in Pugwash, Nova Scotia. We're claiming you as a Nova Scotian now, too.
Okay.
So I was happy to hear that. But look, everyone around this table is trying to deal with a situation that was thrust upon us. Nobody here created this situation. It's created this divide between our countries. And Canadians, you know, when they hear the talk of the 51st state stuff, we're pretty ticked off about that. It kind of makes us really upset. So, but when we get together and talk about what's possible and how do we move forward, that's the stuff that we should focus on. And look, as we try to govern, we're all trying to deal with certain issues in housing and healthcare and energy for sure. And I think energy is a place where we could collaborate together for the benefit of all of our citizens. In the Nova Scotia offshore, we have incredible wind speeds. It blows a lot. The water depths are good. The potential is so strong. And Canada as a country has 0 offshore wind farms. And we want to build the first one in Nova Scotia. And we could generate a lot of energy there. We think over 66 gigawatts in the first instance. We have a big need for that in Nova Scotia as we will consume more. My colleagues across Atlantic Canada have big needs. We're talking about, you know, investments in transmission to support each other. That energy is needed in New England as well, for sure. And it's clean, it's reliable, it's stable, and it's what we're all looking for. So there's all kinds of opportunity to collaborate on, you know, cost sharing on that, on research to get the cost down, to make sure it's a more mature industry that benefits citizens. But I think my main takeaway from this today is there's definitely things that we can't address. Like there's just certain things that are outside of our control. You know, we can't control what people tweet in the middle of the night. But there are things that are within our control, and that's where we should work together. And I think energy and research and you know, just always put in the citizen first. That's something we can do. And so today has been kind of a good reminder for me about, you know, the quality of the people and the relationships that we have and the possibilities. So I appreciate Governor Healey pulling us together today. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. Commissioner Dykes, if I could, we've been talking a lot about energy trading, the need for energy. Connecticut has a big interest in transportation, aircraft, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about your thinking on cross-border energy trading, but sort of in light of transportation being so energy dependent?
Well, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here on behalf of Governor Lamont. He's attending the Paris Air Show with a delegation of business leaders from our state. Our aerospace industry is a really important aspect of our economy, and we know that that's also important to our trade with Canada, which is our largest trading partner. And we are, in our state, Governor Lamont is very focused on energy affordability and having a reliable grid. And our path towards that goal is critical towards supporting economic growth, including in manufacturing, and helping to bring down the cost of energy for our citizens. And I think there's been a lot of discussion today about how these recent events, you know, Governor Lamont has said that trade wars, they call them wars because they hurt both sides. And we see those impacts. It's also shined a light on this critical relationship and the ways in which our partnership with Canada is supplying, roughly 8% of our electricity today from emission-free hydropower. We rely on LNG imports and heating oil to keep people warm in the winter, keep the grid reliable. And so this is a moment where I think as we look towards the long term, there are a lot of things that we can do, and that takes looking for more opportunities for partnership on energy. It's also one of the strengths at this moment is unprecedented collaboration among the Northeast states on energy as well. And so I'm grateful to be here. I appreciate Governor Healey bringing us together and at this critical moment.
Thank you so much. And we're great on time, by the way. Premier Lance, if I could, you have a big background, a long background on new business as an investor and as an advisor. So rather than talk about what the challenges we are having between our countries in terms of reduced revenue or rising energy prices, could you maybe talk a little bit about joint strategies we could implement to attract foreign direct investment and support these emerging industries that benefit for both regions?
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'm glad to hear that there's unprecedented collaboration in Northeast states on the energy file, because that's something I would say that's happening across Canada and in particular in our Atlantic region, just based on the circumstances that have been forced upon us. Some of you may or may not know that this whole trade situation really brought to light a situation in our country that made us realize that trade even between our provinces in Canada is not as efficient as it should be. There's a lot of regulatory barriers to the movement of goods and services and labor mobility. And this has forced us to collaborate very closely to work on dropping those trade barriers in light of the barriers that are now in place between our countries. So there has been a lot of regional cooperation, and I think that's where we can cooperate with our friends and colleagues here in the Northeast United States on a regional approach to many of the challenges we face and on economic development and strategic priorities. So there's many examples in Canada at this time between our provinces, but just in our region, I would use, I am here, of course, for this meeting of governors and premiers, but I'm also here representing my province at the BIO conference, which is an important sector for our small province, Prince Edward Island, and we're here, of course, to grow that sector, but there's examples of cooperation in our region. For instance, one of the larger companies in Prince Edward Island, BioVectra, we cooperated with Nova Scotia to incentivize investment in both of our provinces. As leaders of distinct jurisdictions, we often look at a zero-sum game of investment in our own provinces, but when we take a regional approach, we all win. And I think when we talk about regional approaches, we need to talk about the entire Eastern Seaboard. So you've heard today about the Eastern Energy Partnership, which is what Mark Carney has started a discussion about nation-building projects or projects of national interest in Canada. So we, as a region, have come together to propose large projects in partnership with each other to build an energy infrastructure that would then attract private investment in energy capacity. So I'd also like to point out that Mark Carney has recently promised to meet the NATO target of 2% of GDP spending on defense recently, so by March, which I think is ambitious, but that's something that we should be putting our mind to on a regional approach so that we can benefit from that type of spending in Prince Edward Island. We've got an aerospace industry, which we would like to get a piece of that defense spending, and I think that we need to be looking at that on a regional approach, not just in Atlantic Canada, but the entire Eastern Seaboard. So there's many opportunities, I think, that in forums like this we should be discussing, and when we get past eventually this situation we're in now, those opportunities will become more apparent and a real opportunity for all of us.
Thank you very much. Well, you've heard the themes here today, looking for resolution and cooperation even in light of these tariffs, reduce divisions and barriers, the issues around supply chain, energy products, rising energy prices, reduced revenue, and resolution that benefits both sides of the border. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Governor Healey.
Well, I'll offer a few concluding maybe remarks, and then we'll open it up to questions. You know, this convening came about a while ago. Governor Mills and I were having a conversation shortly after President Trump announced tariffs, and we thought it was very important, recognizing the very serious consequence of that move, to bring together our colleagues in the New England states and also New York, together with Canadian premiers. The relationship between the United States and Canada is so deep, and the relationship between this region of our country, the Northeast, and Canada is deep. Relationships familial, cultural, economic, and so much more. I think from this morning's discussion, you should know a few things. One, we intentionally held the convening here at the State House. This is a place that has been around since really nearly the beginning of our country. And it's a place that John Hancock, he owned the land here and he gave it over for the construction of this State House. And Paul Revere and Sam Adams laid the cornerstone. And so, you know, our ties are really between and among one another as governors reflect really the initial origins of this great country of ours. And that has existed the entirety of our time alongside this relationship, this important relationship with Canada. We talked this morning. It is no doubt the case that this has been tested, not between and among the relationship that we have with one another. We're colleagues who have great respect for one another, but it's a challenging time. I think across the board, we could all say that our tourism numbers, for example, are down anywhere between 20 and 60% in all of our states. We have seen serious impacts and disruption to the supply chain. We have seen impacts that you can't quite put a price on, but are real. Concerns about traveling to the United States and safety. Concerns about traveling to the United States and what might happen in terms of border activity. Concerns about investing here because of the federal government's move away from investments in science and research. And real acknowledgement that while we are dear friends and allies, we all need to take care of our own and ourselves. And for the first time, we know that our friends to the north, some of them are exploring partnerships with other countries, and that never would have been contemplated were it not for what was necessitated as a result of President Trump's actions. The positive, though, was that we had a lot of conversations about what we can do, including continuing by what we're doing today to show that the Northeast is open for business, we're open for trade, we value and respect our Canadian neighbors and their businesses. We look for continued ways we may invest in one another and support one another. We also had real conversations about things like energy. And while we need to work through this moment of tariffs and uncertainty, and we'll see what today yields in Alberta, we are going to be left with standing needs, including, for example, a tremendous need for energy in our region. And there is an opportunity for new partnerships. We talked a great deal, not just about Premier Ford and nuclear. We talked about a range of energy options and partnerships that we want to explore bilateral that will help all of us, I believe the provinces as well as the states. That is something positive. New ways we can think about trade and investments. So it was a sobering discussion this morning, an important discussion this morning. a continued discussion for sure, and I am grateful to my colleagues, governors, for your presence here today. I am very grateful to the premiers for traveling to Massachusetts for this discussion, and I think from this we expect to have more meetings, more discussions, and more activity. The last thing I'll say is there was an urgency to our discussion. There was an urgency to our discussion, and I think among all of us, we're all, I think, impatient folks, and we want to actually do things and deliver things. And so I appreciated that, and looking forward to seeing what we can make happen from this, and most importantly, to show to Canadians that America is your friend, America is your ally.
Thank you, Governor. Carissa, did you want to?
Hi, Mike Crawley from CBC News in Toronto. Question for the governors. Governor Healey, you mentioned how significantly tourism is down in your states. I wondered if any of you could talk a little bit about, make that more tangible. What's it actually look like how exactly your tourism industries are being affected? And also, is there any sort of message to Canadians who don't really want to come to the States? They don't want to cross the border.
Sure, I can take that. Look, our tourism between February and April is down about 26%. Talking to local businesses up and down the coast in particular, reservations have been canceled. And some of these relationships go back a long time. I talked to one business owner who's been in business, his family had been in business since 1677, a local B&B. And they've always had significant Canadian traffic and families who came back year after year, year after year. It's not the tariffs that are affecting them so much as the hurt pride in Canadian citizenry. And boy, I understand that. And we are doing our best to promote our state, of course, and marketing tools and setting up signs at the 13 different border crossings that say, Bienvenue Canadien, and please come, and all those things. You know, I'm just one governor. Some businesses are marketing more to other states to make up the difference and whatnot. But we want Canadian people to know that we cherish our relationships. We have shared a lot of our long-lasting assets and amenities in the meeting this morning, and we want to continue to do that. You know, as others said, these relationships are so intertwined, family relationships, Acadians who came across hundreds of years ago, people from Sherbrooke who came into Lewiston, Maine and Biddeford, Maine to work in the mills and develop families there. About a quarter of our Maine population speak French Canadian for that reason. Those things don't just end overnight because of some dangerous rhetoric coming from Washington. We continue to have positive relationships with people of Canada, economic relationships. We share cuisine, we share a language, we share an awful lot that cannot be broken by somewhat aberrational language coming from certain parties in DC. We are talking to our congressional delegations time after time to make sure they reinforce our stand not just on tariffs, but on Canadian-American relations, which are extremely important to us, not simply for economics, but for the spirituality, the spiritual relationships that we carry within us with Canadian people. And so that's why I put up signs in our businesses all up and down the coast of Maine and interior Maine to make sure that, not just because of the Canadian dollar, but we welcome them. We're talking about vouchers and discounts to make sure that they feel welcome in our state, because they should. They deserve it, they've earned it, and they are our people too.
Bookings are down. In Massachusetts, we expect it's about 20% is the decline. I think New Hampshire is that. Vermont reports that hotel reservations by Canadians are down 45%, credit card spend by Canadians down 36%. In New York City, bookings by Canadians are down 45%. Those are just some examples. And we also have heard that any number of school trips. As a kid who took her school trip to Toronto in the 8th grade, school trips from Canada to the United States are way down.
Hey there, Matt Pritchard, NBC Boston. Some of you have referenced the G7 today. Just curious if there's anything that could come out of that meeting that would be productive and helpful to these issues that you guys are bringing up. Would love to hear from the governors as well as some of the premiers.
There are a lot of positive things that could happen. We don't know what is happening, but.
Well, I think one of the positive things is that they're meeting. They're gonna sit down, Prime Minister Carney and President Trump, and they're gonna have a discussion. And hopefully it will sink in to President Trump, this is serious. As they're, negotiating and sitting down, the engine of, I'll speak for Ontario, is just moving forward, onshoring as many products as we can. And I was telling the governors earlier that once we start onshoring the tens of billions of dollars that we procure from the U.S., you can't turn off the tap. So I can't stress the urgency for both Prime Minister Carney and President Trump to strike some sort of deal to give people certainty. That's what we need. We need certainty. Investors need certainty. The people, the 9 million Americans that wake up to produce a widget or a product, and a lot from these states here, for just Ontario, not the rest of Canada, every single day, 9 million Americans wake up and produce a product. We're sitting back and we're inventorying these products. Here's $1 billion. I used aluminum cans. We're onshoring the aluminum cans now. That's $1 billion industry. There's thousands of Americans are gonna lose jobs because of it. A tariff on Canada is nothing more than a tax on Americans. We have to stop that. And you see the cost of everything, steel. Anything that's built in steel now, it's gone up 16%. We import, I'm just speaking for Ontario, $30 billion of steel. We're looking at the beams. We have more cranes in Toronto than all the 10 largest cities combined in the U.S. And guess where all the steel beams are coming from? The U.S. That's coming to an end. We're going to give incentives to companies. We have big steel companies up there. We're going to start making that steel here because we're going to put it in our procurement. If you don't buy the steel, we're legislating it right in law. So we need to continue working together, and we have to strike a deal because, again, it's going down the tracks right now, and it's going full steam. Tracks, rails that they go on. They come from the U.S. They're no longer coming from the U.S. They're going to be manufactured in Ontario. That's my answer.
Hey, this is...
Yeah, I mean, look, it would be crazy for there not to be a resolution.
Yeah.
And, we joked earlier about our hockey teams and our rivalries, and we're still sorting here from Brad Marchand, and thank you, Premier Houston, for reminding us of that. But in all seriousness, why wouldn't we be working together to build the strongest force that we can? It'll be great for our economies. We'll all win. In this race against China right now, we had a conversation about the minerals, right? And the materials that are present in Canada and some parts of our states. I look to Maine. But, there's so much that is of mutual benefit if we work together. And I think, we're going to do what we can to work together, but we need the federal governments working together. And I just hope that we see through that this week at the G7 and that there be a resolution there so that we all can get on with our lives and innovate and grow our economies and, produce the kind of energy that we need to power the world that we're living in and will live in the future. That's my hope.
The governors and premier have massive amounts of influence.
Turn your mic on, please.
I'll speak for Canada. Oh. Yeah, governors and premiers have massive influence to Washington and to Ottawa. I can assure you, we're going to start, speaking out a lot more and getting our message out there. I know, Anne, you were saying Canada is we buy more products off the US than China, Mexico, Japan, Germany, and the UK combined. And vice versa. The US is our #1 customer. But we got to build that AmCan fortress. And I just want to correct the record because it drives me crazy that we buy twice as, no, that's not the case. Let's take the 1.4 billion barrels of oil that the US needs, that gets for a discount, then they upsell it and make a ton of money. That's here nor there. But we are going to start building pipelines to divert it around the world and saying that, take that off the balance sheet because it's oil that you need. You have close to a $50 billion surplus with Canada. That's the number that's not being spoken to accurately out there. Those are the facts. That's the truth. Simple as that.
Thank you. For Premier Ford and the other premiers, if I may, a lot of talk about tourism today, how vital that is to this part of the country, our country. Would you encourage Canadians to come to America, spend dollars here this summer as tourists, or should they send a message to President Trump by not coming to America and staying away from our country? What say you?
I would first say, travel around Canada. Come to Ontario. It's massive. It's twice the size of Texas. But I've always said, and I love the US, I love the Americans, all Canadians do, I'd never stop people from coming down here. There's a tremendous amount of people that live down here that are Canadians and vice versa. Tremendous amount of, there's actually $30 billion of real estate just in Florida that Canadians own. Not to mention how many people come right here to Boston and New York City. Life science sector is massive in the province of Ontario. Matter of fact, I'm going to see a Canadian company later today for a tour. But we're so intertwined. Our supply chains are so intertwined, similar to the auto sector. Parts going back and forth 6, 8 times before it gets assembled. We need to get through this, and we need to we're stronger together. And keep an eye on China. As they're laughing, they're sitting back laughing at both of us and saying, boy, as they're moving forward and building up their critical mineral supply, building small modular reactors, that's who you have to keep an eye on.
If I could add, it's challenging for us to hear from our fellow colleagues that they're seeing a massive drop in tourism. And we know that means that somebody who's working at Hampton Beach, like Governor Healey used to, might be losing their job, or that all of that, was a 36% decrease in spend in New York. That means people in the US are losing their jobs in tourism. And we don't like to hear that. But what we want to say to them is, you got to make noise. You got to tell your leader that this is hurting the American economy, that this is hurting jobs in the US. Canadians can't pass that message for you. We need Americans to look around and see that the people who get up every morning and are making a part that goes across the border and then comes back, or the fishermen in Maine who are catching a lobster that's getting processed in New Brunswick and then coming back, that those jobs are at risk, that this tax has hurt the American economy and the American people. And we need Americans to pass that message up through, and hopefully we'll have 2 open ears that will hear it and realize that the best relationship between our 2 countries is one of free, fair, and open trade. But I can't tell Canadians to come visit the US right now. I'm going to tell them to go and see my neighbors in Nova Scotia. I'm going to tell them to spend some time at home because the relationship has been challenged by leadership, and we need to get back to normal. That's what we all want. Normal and better. Normal and strengthened ties, because the threat from China is real. We have the minerals, we have the products, we are close neighbors. Our economies are so integrated that when an American loses their job in tourism, that's going to have a ripple effect on Canada. We don't want that. But we need a certain person to hear that this is hurting jobs for Americans and hurting their economy. And so we've got to ask the American tourism workers to make that clear and to speak up.
Last question. Greg Ryan from Bloomberg. Is there any concrete agreement that will be coming out of this summit, or any concrete actions you plan to take as a result?
Yes. We're going to take back the conversations that we had today. I mentioned energy. For example, a year ago, we all came together and we talked about ways that we could better partner on energy, both procurement of energy, the building out of transmission, and the infrastructure that we need to provide more energy independence to all of us. And there's work to do to continue on that we talked about some today. The work around trade, obviously we're limited as individual provinces and states to a certain extent around some of this, which is why we need action out of G7. But I think we're going to commit to work on ways to ensure a better flow of trade and a sustained flow of activity that will mitigate against some of the disruption to the supply chain that we've seen. Around tourism, we are committed to marketing the Northeast as a great destination for Canadians to come and visit still in this time. And that's work we need to do on our part. And we're going to continue to talk about, I think, you'll see the messaging and the continued education of the public about what this relationship means, how important it is. It's also the case, as important as Canada is to the United States, for all that Canada provides to us, the United States also provides a tremendous set of consumers, and we all benefit from this. And so, I think that as leaders, we're going to take this back, and I expect good things to come from us, concrete things, but also, hopefully we're sending a message today to our friends in Canada and to others across the United States that we are open for business. We want to continue with a relationship that has stood us well for decades now, and that's what we're committed to doing.
Let me just say, if I may, that some of us, we all shared the sentiment earlier, I think, that Canada and Canadians do not deserve the expressions of disrespect that they're receiving. We honor our Canadian friends and neighbors and relationships. We remember, and the powers that be should remember, that it was the Canadian embassy that saved the lives of American diplomats during the Iran hostage affair in 1980. It was Canadian communities in Garda, Newfoundland, who welcomed thousands of stranded passengers after 9/11, many of them American citizens who were terrified of what was going on and found hospitality with a capital H during that horrendous time. It was Canadian troops that stood up before American troops did in World War I, World War II, Korea, Afghanistan. They stood by us and stood with us in times of peace and times of war, and we need to stand up for them now. And we do want to stand for them and with them. It's not just an economic thing. I'm not just here to say, oh, the Maine economy is going to suffer if Canadians don't come to Old Orchard Beach this year. But our relationship suffers, and it shouldn't. And we do respect Canadians and the country, the sovereign country of Canada.
Well, thank you, Governor Mills and Governor Healey. I'll tell you one thing. We all share the same values, and we all want the same end game, is to build our trade, fair and free trade, and we look forward to getting it done. And this is a great voice. Again, I want to thank Governor Healey, all the governors and premiers for attending. If we didn't feel this is very concerning, we all wouldn't have flown in here. And this shows unity. And I can tell you, after our talk and we build relationships, we're all united here. We are all united, all from different political stripes, by the way, in different countries, but as one united voice that we're speaking from, saying, let's get a deal. But thank you. God bless America. God bless Canada, and we'll get it done.
Thank you.
Thank you all.